Hi, I'm Reb Day and welcome to the second part of my mini-series, What Does a Producer Do?, in which we all go together on a big journey and I teach you what a producer does. It's so beautifully ironic that I only have the time to make this video now because all of my projects have been postponed or cancelled thanks to you know what. I have also had the time to cut myself a quarantine fringe, so it's not all been a waste of time. In part one of this series, I answered the questions that you lot had about producing, and I felt very validated in my life choices. The link will be somewhere around here, use your brains. In this video, I'm gonna do a kind of light to medium production breakdown of the Jack and Dean sketch, How to Get to Heaven. If you already have no idea what I'm talking about, the sketch will be linked somewhere. And whilst you're over on Jack and Dean's channel, give them a little subscribe because they need the confidence boost, bless them. Bit of background, I've been working with Jack and Dean since 2015-ish. I think the first time I met Dean, he was in a coffin. So, if there ever was to be a symbol of our friendship. I started out as a runner for them and then went on to be a production assistant on their second series of Jack and Dean of All Trades. Did a bit of art directing, associate producing, and now Jack and I co-produce pretty much all the Jack and Dean sketches. Depending on the scale of the sketch we're making, the lines of my role tend to get a little blurred, and I can bleed into other departments, which is what happened in How to Get to Heaven. So I thought this would be a good example to break down for you. For the sake of simplicity, I've attempted to break down this video into 6 sections, which we are calling the 6 W's. Wow, I haven't done that in a long time. What are we making? When are we making it? Where are we making it? Who do we need to make it? What do we need to make it? And why are we spending so much? What are we making? What are we making? I know this is a bit of a vague question, and I've only got myself to blame because I came up with it. Basically, my job in pre-production is to establish what we need and how much it will cost. I will start any project now by making a massive Google Sheet document complete with buttloads of tabs, estimated budget, actual spend budget, crew information, so like contact details, allergies, cast information, camera and lighting equipment lists, prop lists, costume lists, location short lists complete with information of like contact info, fee, how long we can be there, what are the pros and cons of that location, where is it? Just basically all the information that I possibly need. The spreadsheet essentially becomes my Bible for the project. Once I've made an estimated budget and told people what they can spend and have conversations with crew about their fees, I will then make a to-do list, basically prioritising what needs to be done the earliest or what needs to be started the earliest if it's kind of an ongoing thing, and basically just work my way down. I personally use Evernote for my to-do lists just because I like the little notebooks. But if I'm kind of making a sort of like massive head of department list, I'll do it in a Google Doc and then everyone can access it and tick off what they've done and what not. Not that anyone ever does. Why are we spending so much? Woohoo! Why are we spending so much? Your budget is going to hands down be the main influence over your project. It dictates everything. This sketch was mostly funded by Jack and Dean's Patreon people, but the boys themselves also chucked some money in just to cover any essential costs. But for the sake of this video, we had about £1,000 to work with. I know £1,000 sounds like a good chunk of money. That could buy you like 3,000 Freddos. When you're making a video to the high production quality that Jack and Dean are, it goes like that, man. It goes like that. So how did we manage to make this very funny, beautiful, well-written and well-produced sketch for £1,000? Where are we shooting? Where are we shooting? Where are we shooting the sketch? Locations are always going to be one of your biggest outgoings, especially on kind of smaller budget things. They're so expensive, especially in London. Like I said, we had £1,000 to make the whole sketch, and you would be incredibly lucky or a really talented hustler to get a day in a studio for that. We were specifically looking for a white Infinity Cove studio, which basically means that instead of having corners where the floor meets the wall, it's curved, so it creates this illusion that the room is like never ending and that it's edgeless, much like heaven. We also needed to be able to film the hell portion of the video in the same room, so the studio needed to have like blackout capabilities. So how did we find the location? How we ended up filming it? So Jack and Dean wrote the first draft of the script, which was originally called Meet God. They wrote that in November 2018. A month later, coincidentally, Jack recorded an episode of Kermode on Film at a studio called Broadley Studio, run by a lovely man called Richard. And the studio was, you've guessed it, a white Infinity Cove studio with blackout capabilities. When we started pre-production for the sketch in March 2019, Jack managed to basically charm Richard's bloody socks off. And we managed to get the studio on a quiet day for a really reasonable fee, meaning we could allocate more money to other aspects of the sketch. They really don't lie when they say it too, you know. When are we making it? When are we making it? Due to getting the studio at a lower rate, and because of cast and crew availability, we shot the sketch on Sunday the 31st of March 2019, which was Mother's Day. Why are you telling me the day, you ask? You'll find out, it's important. Who do we need on set? A lot of the points I'm gonna make in this video start with the phrase, due to financial limitations. So if you wanna make that a drinking game, be my guest, but you will be trashed. Due to financial limitations, we could only afford like the absolute essential people on set. So including all cast and all crew, we had a total of 8 people, and it was 3 cast and 5 crew, but Jack obviously doubled up as director too. Everything costs money, people cost money. If there's one takeaway that I want you to have from this video, it's that everything costs money. And so it should. People should be paid for their work. The Jack and Dean crew has pretty much stayed the same for the past few years, which is really nice. And it's not that we're like closed off and we don't want new people to join, but like you get into a pattern and you develop shorthands with people that you work with a lot. And honestly, it's just the most efficient. For this shoot, we had Kieran O'Brien DPing, Rachel Hutchings camera assisting, Tommy Boom as the King of Sound, that is his official title, and Jess, lovely Jess Whitehead was our runner, and then I was sort of like producer slash arty farty person, and then we had Daniel J who played Jesus. Keeping our crew down to an absolute essential bare minimum meant that we could keep costs down. I think if I would have done anything differently, I probably would have pushed for a lighting person, but these are sacrifices you have to make, unfortunately, especially when you've got a small budget. What do we need? What do we need? In terms of production scale, this sketch was pretty minimal considering the slightly abstract concept. Costume-wise, Jesus outfits, really easy to find in fancy dress shops. All of the props were like pretty easy to source, and they didn't need much altering in order to fit the aesthetic of heaven. Hello, just popping in to clear up the absolute mess that past Reb made of this section, and also just to give you some more specific information. The table and chairs that Jack and Dean sit on and at were actually from IKEA. I'm sure they won't mind me saying, but their returns policy is quite lax, very casual. So after the shoot, we managed to return those items pretty easily, which meant we saved some of that all-important dollar. The other props, like the clipboard and the buzzer, were pretty easy to find. I think the boys just went round Poundland. The night before the shoot, literally at like 11 p.m, Jack and I thought it would be really funny to make an admissions form for heaven that's got Jack's details on it, a bit like a kind of like police record. And we spent quite a long time making that, and you don't even see it in the final edit. I'll post a link below if you want to read it properly, but we just thought it was the funnest thing, and we had a good old chuckle making that. So that's a nice little kind of Easter egg for us. Unlike most other Jack and Dean videos, we managed to cross shoot this one, so we normally only have one camera, but this time we had 2 because the studio just had one lying around. Cross shooting is really good if you can do it, because I think it probably saves time, and also it gives the boys room to play around and do a bit of improv.
Do you know he was nailed to a cross once? I did hear about that, yeah. I just watched.
Also, thanks to the studio and lovely Richard, we had access to a dolly, which we hadn't really planned for, but it really elevated the sketch, I think, and created those lovely slidey shots that you see at the beginning and the end. I'm not technical, I don't know, they're slidey. The main art design element that needed a bit more work was the clouds, and I feel like this is probably the best example of my role in Jack and Dean land. So Jack and Dean were pretty dead set on having it look like they were walking on clouds, especially in the wider shots. There were two routes that we could explore to try and achieve this. We could do it in post-production using VFX, or we could do it practically, which means doing it in real life. So we had a few things to weigh up here. What would be the most cost effective, most important? What would be easier, and what would look better? There is one VFX shot in the sketch, which is when Dean pops into heaven. But I imagine, and I'm not an expert, but I imagine that is a lot easier than recreating clouds on the floor that kind of respond to actors' movements. It just feels like it'd be more of an intricate job.
Having spoken to Jack, I've learned that this is just an outright lie. There are actually two VFX shots in the sketch. The second one is in the hell section, where lovely Dave Brain, VFX wonderkind, has managed to make flying sparks happen on the screen. I don't know how he does it.
VFX artists are highly skilled people, and therefore they're expensive. And because we were trying to spend as little amount of money as possible, we decided that the VFX route was probably a no-go. So then Jack and I basically started having discussions about how we were going to make clouds in real life. We did have access to a haze machine on set, but the problem with haze is that once it's out of the machine, it disperses and rises up and just makes everything look hazy, like in this shot here. And what we needed is we needed the clouds to stay concentrated and low to the ground. This is when we started looking into dry ice. Now, I have never really experienced or used dry ice ever in my life before, so I really didn't know anything about it, apart from it's a bit sciencey. This meant I ended up reading quite a lot of articles and watching a lot of YouTube videos about how to use dry ice effectively, but most importantly safely, because they are chemicals. They can potentially be dangerous. Once Jack and I felt confident that dry ice was gonna be the best thing to help us achieve the effect we wanted, it was then my job to start ringing around dry ice vendors in London and see how much they thought we would need, how much they could sell it to us for, and more importantly, whether they could deliver on a Sunday.
I told you mentioning the day would be important.
This was the thing that I came up against the most. There were a few vendors who had the right quantities for the right price, but they just didn't deliver on a Sunday. We couldn't get it delivered to someone's house or the studio the night before in case it melted. None of us had freezers big enough, and we also couldn't risk it melting on the way to set. So I needed to get the dry ice delivered on the shoot day within a specific window, all for the right price, and eventually we found one. A couple of things we hadn't really bargained for was that the studio lights were so hot that once we got the dry ice going, Jack and Dean would get to the end of their little walk, it would all be gone and the illusion would be ruined. The thing that makes the dry ice do what it does is a chemical reaction and is quite noisy, so we were also having to factor in the fact that we could hear the bubbles on the mics. So it was just a very tense, tight time frame of trying to get it all going, wait for it to settle, wait for the bubbling to go down. Jack and Dean do the walk, hope they get it right because we've only got a limited amount of dry ice to go round. It was very high pressure, but it looked sick. In terms of post-production, Jack and Dean use the same team pretty much every time. Jack edits the sketch, Dan Pugsley does the sound design, Ben Squires does the score, and then Kieran normally colour grades. I tend not to get too involved in overseeing post-production, just because Jack's got a pretty good handle on it, but to wrap up, I will do an actual spend budget alongside the estimated budget so we can see where we saved and where we overspent, and I'll also kind of make sure that people's invoices get paid on time. That's basically it. I hope this was somewhat informative and hopefully not too boring. Thanks for watching. All the links will be below. Please stay safe and stay home.